I'm Josh with Waupaca Community Media. We're back for our weekly update. We've got Ron Sari from the Waupaca School District and Aaron Jensen from the City of Waupaca. Hello, guys.
Hey.
And the first thing we're going to start with is talking about some housing-related topics. And the first one, the State of Waupaca is proposing using their ARPA funding for a residential housing project. And Aaron, you can give us the details what that means.
Yeah, so this is a conversation we've been having internally for a long time, about a year. I think that first payment for the ARPA funding came in last spring. The city is set to get about just over $620,000 over the two payments. The United States Treasury has given us some guidance and said, hey, don't go and make your plans right away. Just continue to hang tight for further guidance from the Treasury to make sure that it's an eligible expense. Look at what other communities are doing. And that's what we've been doing. We've been keeping an eye on what our opportunities may be, and then what other communities are doing, and how do our opportunities relate to that. So one thing that we're seeing that a lot of communities are using it on is revenue replacement. So any revenues that were down over the COVID years from 2020 and 2021, a lot can backfill those revenues with this extra money, which makes a lot of sense. For us, it's a really positive thing that we don't have that issue. In 2020 and 2021, we were buoyed by really, really high revenue line items in building inspection. And we budgeted about $75,000 in building inspection. And with the development we had, we took in just shy of $300,000 in 2020 and over $300,000 in 2021. So those revenues covered for all of the other revenues that we may have come short on. So that makes us ineligible for that. Broadband is another one that communities are using it on, especially the rural townships in the county that they're looking at projects, as you well know, Josh. For the city, it's a little different, whether it's us or New London or Clintonville. We have pretty good coverage within our city limits, so broadband doesn't really make the most sense to spend it on. And then investments in water and sewer facilities is another thing. And really what we'd be looking for there is projects that would have an impact to the actual ratepayers. And we just, in talking with Justin and Kathy, our finance director, we don't see where projects would lower the rate or keep the rate at the same when it may be projected to go up. So we would want to see that impact back to our ratepayers. So that has kind of led us to a conversation that had come forth. Actually, it was Mayor Smith brought it forward a couple months ago, in the idea of giving back to the community and our residents through a housing program. We have in our strategic plan, it noted that we want to have an impact on helping revitalize our aging housing stock. Actually, over 48% of the housing within the city limits is older than 1970. So this is not, direct city taxpayer money. It's money we didn't expect. And we want to mimic the downtown business incentive program, but now move it to the residential side of things and give residents an opportunity to do projects that helps fix up their homes, updates them, extends the longevity of them, increase curb appeal, through a grant system up to $10,000. So we talked about that at our council meeting last week, and we're going to be talking about it again after some input from council at that meeting. We're going to bring back a little updated version, but I think that's something that we've got really positive response on, and that's the road that we're pursuing right now.
So if council approves that and everything goes through, what kind of timeline do you expect for that program to get going?
Well, we would like it up and running for this spring, when people can start doing projects, getting building permits if it's needed for that specific project. So we hope a lot of information will be rolled out soon. We'll continue the discussion at council, and people can keep an eye out for that.
Very cool. And the other topic related to housing, an update on the River North subdivision that's in planning process. So where are we at with that?
So there's been a lot of talk recently over the last year plus on the River North subdivision and the housing and how our vacant lots are getting filled up, and we need to start at that next planning stage and planning that next development. And we've moved to the Business and Technology Park, where we have some infrastructure supporting everything out there, and it's just been largely sitting undeveloped. There are some developments out there, but there's about 80 acres of open space. We see it as really an infill opportunity to meet the greatest current need, which is housing. We hear that from our large employers, our school district, our chamber, and we feel like that's our most cost-effective way to add housing units, which is so needed in our community. And right now we've worked through interviews with interested parties and developers. We sent out RFPs. We received some back. Right now we're just working through those conversations, and city council can expect to see something and potential professional services agreements as early as February 1st at that council meeting. So yeah, we're moving along, and there's a great video that Josh, that you put together. If people want more detailed information, go to our Facebook page and check out that video on River North. And if you have questions off of that, feel free to contact myself at any time.
When you get up in the air with a drone over that property, you really get a whole different view of what's really going on out there, the proximity of the river. It's different than just driving through what the average person sees day to day when they go through there. So
it is, and you have some nice shots of that. So if people want that perspective, check out that video.
So we want to talk about another funding source with Ron. So the city's getting ARPA funding. We're looking at using that in housing. The school district's getting what's called ESSER funding, and you're going to be working through a plan on how to utilize that. You've got an upcoming stakeholder meeting at the end of January. What is ESSER funding, and what are some of the ideas out there for it, Ron?
Well, we had like ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and now we're in ESSER 3. These are federal dollars that the feds are giving to school districts across the country. And ESSER is an acronym for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. So this is the third grant, and it is a $2.4 million grant. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but people have to realize it's a one-time only. So it's not like a repetitive where we keep getting that money. And also the state has frozen our additional funding for the next 2 years. So that what that means is we're not getting additional aid or an increase in our revenue limit. That's just staying put. And that's based on what the governor and the legislature in the state of Wisconsin have decided. So of that 2.4 million, we're going to have to kind of backfill and use some of that, a lot of that, to run our district for the next 2 years. But 20% of it is designated through the law to be used to utilize evidence-based practices to close the learning gap that took place during the COVID shutdown time of last year and then the fourth quarter of the 2019-20 school year. So we put a plan together to reopen our schools. That's been submitted, but now this plan is to how are we going to spend that money? And the 20% is about $480,000 to be spent over 2 years. So it'll be next year and then the year after that. And so what we did is presented last night, the third in a series of 4 presentations. Every month we've been doing a presentation about where we're at, what's the data showing us, where are our needs, where are our strengths, what can we do differently. And so last night we shared this with the board. We talked about the financial piece that we really have to be strategic in how we utilize these funds, and knowing that they're one time, and having the view of longevity. What do we do after the funds are already used and spent? That's a big part of our planning. We know that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is hovering in the neighborhood of 4%, sometimes above 4%, and we're waiting to see what that final amount comes in at. That tells us that there will be increased expenses in the next 2 years. And without the increased funding from the state, we need to utilize these dollars from the feds. So we talked about what are some ideas of what we could do differently. And those would include possibly the idea of having interventionists for math and English language arts supporting our students. It could include the possibility, we've had an uptick in student behavior issues, a possibility of deans, a dean of students, maybe at the high school to help support our principals there. We have a lot of data across the district, student academic achievement data, behavior data, attendance data, but we don't have a dashboard in place to analyze that data and utilize it to its full capacity. So the idea of creating a data dashboard and maybe having somebody help and assist us in analyzing data so that we can then utilize that and change our instructional practices. Additional professional development, possibly extended contracts for staff to continue their curriculum development that they've been working on for the last couple years, maybe before and after school intervention programs, could be a combination of these. It's only $480,000 over 2 years, so we may have to prioritize which will give us the biggest bang for our buck to invest in to improve, to close that learning gap that occurred from the COVID time.
And your meeting at the end of January is going to include stakeholders to help you prioritize this and figure out what the biggest needs are. So that's the next step. And then you've got a March deadline to kind of have the plan in place.
Yeah, it's due to the feds by March 11th. So we still have time. We've been working on this for several months. And so we're at the point, we've taken and solicited input from a variety of stakeholders. We want some community stakeholders. We want parents to come. Anybody is welcome to come January 31st for that stakeholder meeting at the community room, 5:30 here at the high school.
The last topic we want to touch on today's update is there's going to be an election coming up, both for city council, mayor, and some school board seats. And Ron, we'll start with you. You've got 2 seats that will be up for election. One candidate running again, another one ending his time on the school boards. Tell us a little bit what we can expect on the school board side.
Yeah, we'll have 4 names on the ballot, Josh, because Steve Hackett isn't running and he's open. Dale Felt is running and his seat is open. So he's the sole incumbent. Then we have Ronald Brooks from our community. Ben Warren is the second gentleman running, and we have Kayla Van Dyke Griena. So she's the 4th candidate that is running for these 2 seats that we have open.
It's nice to see a number of people interested in something like this. It's always good to see.
It is.
A variety of candidates. That's cool. And on the city side of things, I believe we just have 1 spot on city council where the incumbent is not running again. I think that spot is open for write-ins.
It is, yeah. So the council member that is deciding to hang it up is Alan Keelan. He's been a great asset for the city for a number of years. So we're disappointed to see him go, but there is an opportunity to fill that. And no one did file their papers. So really, we're looking for any residents in wards 5 and 10. And I know it's hard to know what that means. So basically, if you are a resident in that Muir Lake, Shadow Lake area, South Main Street and South Washington Street, as far north as Lake Street, and then if you move east on Lake Street and kind of all the way to it'd be School Street, and then move south towards the hospital. So that Berlin Street area and all the streets in between. That's really probably the best explanation of where those wards are. So if you're in that area and you're looking to serve in a civic duty, there is an opportunity to be a council member. If you have questions, you can feel free to reach out to myself or the clerk, and I'd be happy. Our clerk is Sandy Stibb. She's great. She knows her stuff. She's been doing it a long time. We'd be happy to fill you in on anything, perhaps make you feel more comfortable. So it would be a write-in candidate at this point. So yeah, we encourage anyone to ask questions.
Very cool. Well, Ron, Aaron, appreciate the time for the update this week, and we will talk again soon.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Josh.